Hello, welcome to Canvas, the Niger-Delta Roundtable, where I discuss the future of this region, humongously blessed with hydrocarbon and human resources. Every week, we give some time to reflecting on topics relevant to the development of the Niger-Delta and her people. Now, this episode is no different. I'm here, and once again, we are focusing on how to take this region to a more promising future. Now, this podcast is sponsored by the operator of the NNPC, Renaissance Total Energies IG joint venture, Renaissance Africa Energy Company Limited, headquartered in Port Harcourt. Thank you for joining. I'm Adedayo in Lushakin. A topic for this episode: how innovation is reshaping energy at Renaissance. When people talk about technology in the energy industry, they often picture tools, software, or machinery. But in reality, technology is something far bigger. It's a mindset, a decision framework, a way of seeing risk, opportunity, and value before they become visible in production numbers or financial results. In today's episode, we focus on technology not as a support function, but as a strategic driver, one that influences how decisions are made, how uncertainty is managed, how costs are controlled, and how performance is sustained over time. Now, this is a conversation about how Renaissance is using technology to think smarter, move faster, and operate more responsibly in a complex environment. Again, our topic on today's episode of Canvas is how innovation is reshaping energy at Renaissance. And my guest is engineer Abdulrahman Mijinyawa. Abdulrahman Mijinyawa is a senior energy executive with over 20 years of experience across onshore, shallow water, and deep offshore oil and gas operations. After a distinguished career at Shell, he now serves as Vice President, Development, Wells and Technology at Renaissance Africa Energy Company, where he oversees a broad portfolio of oil mining licenses and leads a multidisciplinary team of more than 300 professionals across engineering, subsurface, digital technology, and portfolio management. With expertise spanning petroleum engineering, digital and development strategy, project delivery, and change leadership, Abdurrahman blends deep technical knowledge with strategic insight. He holds an MSc in petroleum engineering from Imperial College London and a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering from Ahmadu Bello University Zaria. Passionate about people and impact, he also serves on the board of trustees of Teach for Nigeria, supporting access to quality education. Abdurrahman Mijinyawa, hi, welcome to Canvas and Niger-Delta Roundtable.
Thank you very much, Dio. Thank you for that very generous introduction. I'm really pleased to be here.
Now, I don't often say this about guests, but I do know that you have an extremely busy schedule, obviously so, considering the portfolio that you manage. And this is a personal thing, delighted you're here today and we can have this conversation. Not only is it key for Renaissance, I think it's a key driver for the industry and in general, Nigeria and even Africa at large.
No, I couldn't agree more. I think this is a very important platform. First of all, thank you for having me here, for providing this platform as well. I'm really pleased to be here to share a few thoughts around what we're doing at Renaissance and how that is important for the Niger-Delta, for Nigeria, but also Africa as a whole.
Speaking of Renaissance, before we delve into the crux of our conversation today, Renaissance is 1 year old. It seemed just like yesterday when the dream was burst, if you will, and 365 days or more have gone already. And how does that feel for you, holding such a strategic position and occupying such leadership position in the country, in the company? Pardon.
Yeah, no, indeed. I think it's a really good question. And I actually tell, the way I see it, I think you say 1 year, 365 days, which is true. That's when the Shell flag was lowered and the Renaissance one came. But this transition started much earlier. For me, it started in 2021 with the announcement of the intent by Shell at the time. And it's important that we also recognize the multidimensional nature of the transition. And, there's transition for each of us as individuals, our families, our stakeholders, but also for our host communities. there's also been a transition. I'm sure since this announcement was made, everybody was wondering what is going to happen. Shell had been here for decades. What is this new company? What are they going to bring? So 1 year later, after that cutover, I think gives me a little pride to continue to see the kind of support and engagement that we continue to receive from our host communities, from the state governments, from the federal governments, from the regulators. The goodwill is just inspiring, and it just pushes me to do even more. So I'm really, really excited. I'm grateful for everything that we've been able to achieve over the past 12 months.
Talking about doing more, your team, I believe, and well, some others as well in Renaissance, not long ago organized an innovation week. Well, speaks to the direction in which the company is going, no doubt, as regards to innovation and technology. So when you think Renaissance and you think technology, as I suggested in the intro earlier on, it's beyond tools and all of that. How do you define technology, innovation, as it applies to Renaissance?
I think you're right. Tools or hardware is just one dimension of technology and innovation. I think for us at Renaissance, it starts with the idea. We try to go beyond asking what technology do we deploy to asking what problem are we trying to solve, because that's where we think the solution starts. And there's so many examples at the Innovation Week, like you mentioned. We had many examples from actual things that solve problems on wellheads, but also to things that make solutions that make cost more transparent. But there were also ideas even as to how we can improve our relationships with our various stakeholders, our contractor partners, our community. So it's around the mindset. How do you think about what problem am I trying to address? I last year when I was reflecting, I reflected around the Cradle to Career program, for example. That may seem like a social responsibility program, but that's innovation in action. Someone thought about how can we make sure that beyond extracting resources, that we're actually delivering impact to people on the ground. Because ultimately, I tell people when all is said and done, people might recall some of the production highs you had, but the thing that remains with people is the impact that you had on them. So what does this mean for me? And for some of the kids who we've been able to take through school, some of whom work for us now, I'm sure you can see how that idea as to how do you take people from their childhood all through to university and to employment, how that has made a difference. So it's a whole range of things, from just soft issues, but also to hard issues, pipelines and wellheads and co for us.
So whilst innovation seems to be a broader concept, it seems to me like you're saying that even technology itself solves a very, very broad range of problems as far as relations activities are concerned.
No, indeed. I can give a few examples. If you think about, if I think about seismic acquisition and interpretation, and seismic, for those that may not know, is the data we acquire, signals we take from the ground to give us a sense of where oil and gas is stored, and that's where you start to plan your wells and your development. Technology has moved from 2D, which is basically like your black and white images, to 3D, which is maybe like your colored photo, and now you have 4D, which maybe you can say like a digital picture. Because if you think about pictures, for example, there's a classic case of Kodak. Kodak invented the digital photograph, but they were stuck in thinking that pictures needed to be in an album, and they didn't see that pictures actually are about memories. And that's where they missed the point in digital pictures. So digital pictures are not restricted to our album. They preserve memories. So the problem that digital pictures solve is one of preserving memories and not just of taking pictures. So if you think about seismic, for example, what we've seen, we've been able to change the way we develop fields, reduce the scope of our wells. Recently, we had a project where we were going to do about 15 to 20 wells. But after interpreting our seismic, we're able to reduce it by 6 wells to 9 wells, reduce the number of platforms that we needed to build, and took out several hundreds of millions of dollars in cost, which we can use to do other things, and improve other parts of our business.
Is that necessarily a good thing? I thought more wells would mean more money.
I mean, I think up to your point, um, because you have to think about your environmental impact as well. Strictly speaking, the less of a footprint you have on the environment, the better. And the fewer wells that you can drill to access the same resources, so you can still have the same production with fewer wells, the better, because that means you have fewer well locations, you have fewer pipelines, so the chances of any impact on the environment are also minimized.
I think you've already touched on it, but if you could elaborate just a little more. I'm no engineer, but I do hear that there are a lot of uncertainties when it comes to exploration, when it comes to the whole activity, some of which you described elaborately just now. So, how does technology help to reduce those uncertainties significantly to save time and indeed save costs?
Yeah. I think let me give a practical example because I know some of the subsurface bit can be a bit abstract. So if you think about our turbines, so turbines are things we use right across our business for pumps, for compressors, to process gas and to drive fluids. One of the key things is how do you maintain your turbines and your pumps? What do you do? Do you follow the OEM's prescribed, maintenance schedule where you maybe have to take down the facility every 3 months or every 6 months? And you can think about, for example, with turbines and compressors, each time you're taking out a turbine for maintenance, you're going to flare or vent gas. So that's emission. Now, sometimes if you don't follow the prescribed schedule, you also risk breakdown in the company. So where do you find the balance? One of the things that we found at Renaissance is what we call predictive maintenance. So basically, using artificial intelligence, we use the history of the turbine. We train the models with what they call large language models, which kind of are the models behind things like ChatGPT and Gemini. I'm sure most people are aware of those. So you take the history of the compressor. We have decades of history and failure rates, failure modes. We train the models for things like sound or heat. There's certain sounds that come from the turbines or certain heat signatures that come from the turbine that indicate failure. And they can give you a sense of when that failure could occur. So you then find that your maintenance schedule is adjusted to be less frequent because then you flare less, you call less downtime, you spend less, you have more uptime. And at the same time, you're able to intervene when you need to intervene to avoid failure. So that's one practical example of how we're using technology to actually, both enhance availability, increase production, but also reduce emissions.
So maybe my next question spans from my, once again, not being an engineer, but I think technology in general can be complex. So how do you ensure that your adoption of technology increases the value and not complexity?
It's a good question. And I think oftentimes we are guilty sometimes of, seeing very cool technology and trying to find solutions for it. And I think that's usually not the right way. And that's why we always start with asking what problem are we trying to solve? If we really understand that problem, then you find that any technology you're looking for is fit for purpose. And your question, I think, speaks to a deeper, issue around simplicity and simplification because they're not the same thing. Sometimes we mix them up. If I give you an example of an iPhone, for example, or any general smartphone that we have now, it's extremely complex if you open the hood. There are all sorts of parts in there. But if you cover it, and for the user, it's very straightforward to use. So that's I think for me that's the difference. How do you make sure that whatever solution you're building, you make it you make it very user friendly, so that when the user comes to use it, it's intuitive. And I think that's the key to actually making that technology is more easily adaptable. Most people, especially if they're not involved in building the technology or the solution itself, don't need to know the details of the solution. What they need to know is how does it help them. So how do you make sure you prepare an interface that makes it easy for users? I think that's really the trick.
E- Easy user interface is good, and I can appreciate how a person with your experience and knowledge would feel that way about most interfaces. However, no matter how user friendly something is, and I use the example of, say, and this is an arbitrary analogy, say my dad, for example, who's well into his 70s now. I think no matter how user-friendly an interface might be, it's very likely I would be able to um, adapt to it better than my dad would. He would probably struggle for a bit if he even gets the hang of it at all. So, how do we ensure that every technology that's been employed by the organization is able to suit everyone and everyone is able to find it friendly and is able to use it as was designed?
Yeah, no, it's a good question because adoption and scale is a critical success factor of technology. You can't just have a few super users, as we call them. That will not be effective. You need, a critical mass, 40, 50, 60, 70% of the organization as a minimum, taking up that technology for it to really have impact. So that's a really good question. I think a lot of this has to do with leadership and role modeling. And ironically, like you mentioned, many of the leaders tend to be the older part of the organization and probably less likely to even adopt the technology because
I wasn't equating into like that.
no, but we do see it. For example, if you think about artificial intelligence now, AI. I mean, many younger people, it's kind of second nature. Use it for audio, for video, for pictures, and all sorts of things. But for some of the more experienced folks, it takes a bit of a learning. So what we do is we provide a lot of support, and that support comes from mentorship, and we do reverse mentorship. We get, for example, younger folk who are more native to actually mentor older folk as to how to use this. We've provided formal training, in terms of what are the strategic imperatives for deploying certain technologies, so that our leaders role model the use of this technology. Because people follow what their leaders do to a large extent. So that's a key lever that we use. But then we also deploy, very strategic training and engagement process across the organization. Recently, for example, we had an enterprise-wide program where we took people through the basics of ChatGPT across the company, multiple sessions so that it suits people's calendars. Where we show people basic principles, why they use them, answer their questions, give them a safe space to play and experiment with those things, so that they can fail, they can make mistakes, in a safe environment, and build confidence to adopt it. So it's a cultural issue. So you have to encourage people, provide the support, provide the formal training, and then most importantly, how you recognize and reward adoption as well. So those people that actually uptake the technology, use it in their work to generate value, you recognize them and you reward them, because then people see the kind of behaviors that you appreciate as an organization, and hopefully that drives uptake.
How important is data collection and integration, especially as has to do with universal or universally agreed truths, if you will, because data is very key and it has to be truthful across different teams. You talk about the use of artificial intelligence, even the those who program these artificial intelligence, so to speak, would be the first to warn that you have to double check. It's not always correct. It's still very much in, some would say it's in some early phase. So I could use Chat GPT for a process. Someone could use Copilot. And whilst our outcomes might be similar, it's not impossible that there might be differences. To what extent would that have an impact on the business, and what are we doing to address that situation to ensure that data with one team is the same as data with another team, so we don't have any challenges?
That's a good question. And because of the rapidly evolving nature of the space, it makes it even more challenging, because every day there's something new that has come. So how do you keep up? But I think for us, our starting point, our core values, as you know, are crisp. So collaboration, respect, integrity, safety, and performance. So, with respect to your question, you talk about integrity and safety. Those are our starting points. So whatever solution we're going to deploy, whether it's a technology, whether it's a soft or hard, it has to be safe. It has to be compliant. So it has to follow the regulations, local and national regulations. And then it has to be ethical. So as a minimum, we have to put, it has to pass this through these three tests. So that's starting point. And then we have a formal AI policy. For example, we've signed that off as a company. How we're going to use AI, we want to make sure that it's ethical, it's safe, it's not biased, it's inclusive. So these are all principles that we follow at Renaissance. But that still doesn't necessarily solve the question that you asked, answer the question around the centrality of data. Essentially, the technology as we know it today, both hard and soft, is impossible without data. And like I said, because of the speed of change, it can be really difficult to keep up. But what are we doing? I think one of the things we're doing is taking advantage of the advances in AI itself. One of the key areas of improvement in AI is natural language processing. So the ability of AI to process unstructured data. So it doesn't have to be in nicely formed tables and things like that. And we're leveraging that to actually standardize our data. So it's a bit of it's ironic that we're using AI to improve data input, but that's part of one of the things we're doing. The other thing we're doing is an initiative, initial initiative called the OSDU. That's the Subsurface Data Universe. And it's a collaboration amongst the International Oil and Gas Partnership companies, which is a sort of several companies around the world, for which Renaissance, became a member late last year on the back of our divestment from Shell, to standardize all of our data across board and actually make it open source, so that the data is ready. It's in a format that can be used by most of the solutions that we deploy. So those are kind of two of the tracks that we're following. Having said that, though, one of the risks that we see with data, especially with AI, is bias, depending on the data and what's trained. Because AI itself, just like human beings, is as good as its context, as good as what it knows before. And that's why we're putting some of the safeguards we have in our AI policy to make sure that whenever we deploy, before we deploy any AI solutions, we test them for local, consistency. Because a lot of the data models are not built locally. We're building our own capacity to train these models ourselves. But before we get to that sufficiency, we make sure that we test that data is sufficient, is adequate for our local context before we deploy.
Thankfully, we're doing that at Renaissance. Well, what risks are inherent if Renaissance did not do that, or some other organization that may not be following a similar blueprint? What challenges are they likely to face?
No, there's several challenges you can talk about. I think one of them is discrimination, because it's been shown that depending on the data on which AI is trained, it can generate very, very discriminatory outcomes, which can discriminate based on gender, based on ethnicity, based on other considerations. So those are real risks that we need to watch out, and that's why before anyone deploys such solutions, you really need to make sure that you have the basics correct, so that you make sure that you're being inclusive. But there are also safety considerations depending on the kind of recommendations that you get from AI solutions. And for an industry like ours that has significant safety hazards, we need to make sure that any solution we deploy has been stress tested, like I mentioned, for safety, for compliance, and for ethics as a minimum.
Just before we go for a break, you've repeatedly used the word safety in talking about the operations of not just your team, but Renaissance as an organization, and I can't help but notice that. How important, how significant is safety to Renaissance?
It's good you asked that question, because coming from Shell, I think one of the things we reflected on as a leadership team in Renaissance is, in Shell, safety was an imperative. It was it was something that we did. It was embedded. We recognized the fact that when we're transiting to Renaissance, we needed to elevate safety even more. So that's why we made it a core value, and that's why it's one of our core values. It's actually a core value, because safety is at the heart of sustainability for us. As a simple example, how many people are likely to go anywhere where they're not sure they can come back from safely? If or how many people are likely to get into a car that they cannot say, would get them to where they're going to safely? So if we want to be a sustainable business, which is the fourth lever of our vision, which maybe, I would just restate for emphasis, at Renaissance, we want to be Africa's leading energy company, enabling energy security and industrialization of Nigeria in a sustainable manner. So that's the fourth lever. To be sustainable, you first has to be safe. If you're safe, you're reliable, then you earn the right to participate in the wider society, and then make your contribution. So that's why safety is really core for us.
It is Canvas and Niger-Delta Roundtable brought to you by Renaissance, and with Abdulrahman Mijinyawa, we're discussing innovation, technology, and how that is changing and improving energy at Renaissance. We'll go for a quick break. We'll return shortly. This conversation is not over. Please stay with us.
In the heart of our journey, where the sun touches the earth and the wind whispers through the trees, a new chapter unfolds. A chapter where energy illuminates more than just bulbs. It lights up minds. A chapter of unity, a coming together with a common goal to energize futures and illuminating lives. In classrooms, young dreams evolve, inspired by the promise of a brighter tomorrow fueled by available energy. Small businesses flourish, becoming seeds of prosperity. Energy that empowers and is catalyst for growth and change. The future is energy. So, let's light up the path to a sustainable future together. Energy for you, me, and the world at large. Energy for people and planet. We are Renaissance.
Welcome back. Still Converse, the Niger-Delta Roundtable brought to you by Renaissance. I'm Dio. Abdulrahman Mijinyawa is still my guest. We're discussing how innovation technology is improving energy, or reshaping it, if you will, at Renaissance. AR, welcome again.
Thank you.
It all sounds really nice, when you talk technology, when you talk innovation, when you talk artificial intelligence. But I mean, it doesn't take away from the fact that there is a group, rightly or wrongly, who are very concerned as to its implementation now. I see what it does to professionals, what it does to the workforce. Is it going to take people's places right now? Even whether in Renaissance or in the industry or even some other industry for that matter. What's your take on that?
I think it's a really good question, and I think if you listen to many experts, there's a variety of views, around that. You have and the extremes. You have a school of thought that things look, the pace of artificial intelligence, which is kind of a major part of technology. Even though I try to emphasize to people that artificial intelligence is important, very, very important, but it's not the only part of technology. There's a lot of other pieces of technology. But to your question, there's a school of thought that says that things, it's going to replace, millions or hundreds of millions of jobs, and there's lots of people that may be out of work. And the truth is that we're seeing some of it already in certain professions. If you think about the legal profession, parts of the medical profession as well. But then there's also a school of thought that, sees this as an opportunity for enhanced man-machine partnership, if you like. And so you have a half empty and half full kind of perspective. Personally, I'm more on the half full perspective. I think we have an opportunity to improve the way we partner with machines to solve problems. We will need to build new skills, definitely. If you think about when the personal computer or the typewriter came, they replaced a lot of secretaries or typists. But then they created, many, many more professions than those. And maybe many of those secretaries and typists needed to retool. And that's probably something we need to focus on. There's even a specific example that was shared by one of the leading minds in artificial intelligence, I think CEO of NVIDIA, where he said that I think in the US, New York area, they deployed AI for reading scans, so radiology scans, at the hospital. And they noticed that they were hiring more radiologists. So they couldn't understand. We have the scans that can pick up, interpret this AI tool that can interpret scans much faster than human beings or than radiologists, but we're hiring more radiologists. So they wanted to understand what happened. So I think what they found out was that a lot of time we focus on only one aspect of our task or our job, or even the task part of our jobs. We don't really think about the purpose of our jobs. And part of the purpose of the jobs of radiologists, for example, is not one of the tasks is interpreting scans, but the broader purpose of their jobs is to engage with patients, to relate to patients through whatever sicknesses or illnesses they may be dealing with. And what they found was that whereas the AI was able to help reduce the number of radiologists they needed to interpret scans, it created more time for those radiologists to actually engage with patients, which is actually the most important part of healing. So we can take it corollary to our industry. There's a lot of tasks that we do today. If I think about myself, when I came into the industry 20 or so years ago, I probably was hired partly for my analytical skills, the ability to look at data and interpret it and make sense of it, which is true, which is still relevant today. But now you have AI tools that can do that a lot faster, a lot more accurate. Does that mean we no longer need to interpret data? No. But it means that we probably need graduates coming in with a different set of skills because we already have solutions that can help with some of the analysis. So whereas I would spend in those days or weeks processing data, trying to make it into a formula and that's valuable, I can save that time and use it rather to interpreting the data. What does it mean? How does it impact the business? Actually making high-level decisions. So that's kind of how I see it.
Speaking of skills and what's required to do, we'll get to that in a moment, but not before I ask you this. So, with the advent of Renaissance and other indigenous firms playing very critical roles in the industry right now, as against not too long ago, industry dominated by IOCs, where is Nigeria, not just in the oil and gas industry, but generally speaking? So, a while back, there was a space race. Now it appears there's a technology race. Where is Nigeria on that spectrum, in your estimation?
I think what we're seeing, because I consider myself an optimist, so I always like to see the cup half full. Because one would say, look, all the IOCs are going because the environment is difficult and things like that. But I think I see it as a natural evolution. This happens in almost all industries. When industries mature, you tend to find increasing in indigenization because and then of course the front runners or the IOCs tend to move into more difficult zones where they risk, and then we follow as well. So hopefully what we're seeing, as we say, is a renaissance of the industry. It's a rebirth. Increasing indigenization gives an opportunity for us to really make the industry work for us more than it has in the past. To go beyond extraction to value add. We talk about how do we get more refineries? How do we get more gas plants? How do we even make sure that the gas, there's a true balance between export gas and domestic gas? For example, make sure we're supplying our industries with the gas they need for power, for chemicals, and things like that. And to your broader question as to where we are, I think we're at a pivotal moment. And I truly believe so. And I feel privileged to have the opportunity to be able to shape this moment. That I think will lay the foundation for what the energy future for Nigeria and for Africa could be. As we say in Renaissance, we're made in Nigeria, built for Africa. Is Africa behind? Yes. Technologically, yes. But as we've seen with many feats, both individually, in terms of many Africans and Nigerians that have excelled elsewhere in the world, but also in terms of a number of companies that have really done well. If I think about in the financial sector, for example, I think about the money points of this world, the Paystack of this world, the Flutterwave of this world, that have really revolutionized finance. They've created finance, that has not been created anywhere else in the world. That gives me, a lot of hope that we have an opportunity in the energy industry to leapfrog as well, just the same way we did with telecommunications. We leapfrog landlines. We didn't need them. We went straight into GSM, and now we're in the internet age. So in the energy industry as well, I think we have an opportunity to really leapfrog, to take out significant part of our population that still remain in energy poverty.
Speaking of the energy industry, and the question I was pondering a while ago, you talked about skills. maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago or so, when you, or thereabouts, when you got into the industry, there were certain skills that were required of engineers. Fast forward 10, 15, 20 years afterwards, have the skills changed now? What skills are required of engineers that beyond being able to wield a spanner and a screwdriver?
I think I'll say the skills have evolved. I won't say they've changed. And I will give an example with my daughter, who's 11 years old and year 7. And we talk about her schoolwork from time to time. And I told her that, one of my favorite subjects in high school was technical drawing. And I told her we used to use boards and, T-squares and co. And she just couldn't understand how you would use boards and T-squares to draw.
What do they use now?
Computers.
Oh,
They have a computer either design. That's what they use. I mean, they still do a bit of, protractor type angle drawing. But for technical drawing, they just use computers. And I also remember when I was doing my MSc, one of the toughest courses we did was very mathematical, very, analytical. And the professor deliberately put us through a very manual process of learning that course. It was very difficult. And all this while, he had the software. He refused to give us the software until we had finished the course, done the exam. And he said, okay, here's the software. Actually, you don't need to do all that manual bit. What was the learning for me there? I have never gone back to use those manual solutions since I left school. But the process of solving those problems manually, built a certain discipline and understanding in me that makes it easier to use the software. And I think that's where I talk about evolution, not change. So do we need to know how to analyze? Yes. Do we need to have comprehension skills? Yes. You need to be able to read and understand. You need to be able to see data and see patterns and understand what it means. What it means. Do you need to do as much analysis? No. And that's where I think the skills that come in that we need to have now are two I will talk about. Critical thinking. Partly because these machines do get it wrong, like you mentioned. So your ability to look at the suggestions that they made and critically analyze it and say, this doesn't seem right. You can only do that if you're grounded in the basics. If you're not, you only take whatever comes out. So I think critical thinking, the ability to ask what needs to be true for what this recommendation is saying to actually hold. That's one skill. The other one is emotional intelligence or emotional quotients. The ability to sense and judge, because machines can't do that. As smart as they think, they can't perceive. You as a human being are able to sense a room, see where people are going, read people's body language. So those are two critical skills that I think that people need to develop, in addition to really being grounded in those foundational skills as well.
Still along these lines, I remember a time when, for certain math equations or topics, you weren't allowed to use a calculator. You had to use your logbook and things like that. But that seems like light years ago now. So were we better off then, or are we better off now that you can just input something in some AI machine and then voila, it's right there in front of you? Which of them do you prefer?
I think I wouldn't say we're better off or not. I think we're where we are. That's what it is, right? We're where we are. If you think about it now, if you had the old phone, gramophone, and you have a smartphone, and you need to make a call, which one would you use? You use the smartphone because, first of all, you probably remember only 5-6 numbers. Maybe your wife's number, your dad's number, your mom's number. That's probably all you remember. Whereas with the other phone, you have to remember all the numbers, or you have to have a reference. So I think we are where we are.
Or a very thick phone book.
Exactly. I think we are where we are. So it's less about whether we're better off or we're not. I think we are where we are. What do we do where we are? To your earlier questions around understanding, what are the risks and what are the opportunities and how do we navigate them, given what we have. But having said that, importantly, I think the fundamentals will always remain. So for the young people out there listening, those in high school and university, your mathematics, your comprehension of language, whether it's English or Hausa or Yoruba or Igbo or Ijaw, as the case might be, your physics, your biology, your chemistry, your understanding of geography, those are foundational. And those are things that you shouldn't let go of. You really need to understand them and internalize them. because they give you the fuel with which to then deal with this technology. Without that, you find that you may actually just be taking whatever you presented, which actually could sometimes be unsafe, if not outright wrong.
I find I'm still drawn to this line of our conversation. Maybe the last question along the lines for now. So, how do we balance experience-based judgments with data-driven insights? Because from what you're saying thus far, we still need experience.
I think we do, and
What's the balance?
And I don't see a world where experience will stop. I think, and that's why, at the risk of being biased to one product, and I'm not marketing for anyone here, but if you think about Microsoft, which is built on ChatGPT technology, it calls its AI solution Copilot. I think it's deliberate. It doesn't call it autopilot, for example, right? Copilot. It means, and when you have a co-pilot in an aircraft, it's because both of them support each other. So no single pilot flies the plane. So it's that partnership for me. I think that's critical. And there are many. So it's about thinking about. It's kind of a risk reward assessment. I would say, the riskier a situation, the more we should deploy experience. The less risky, more routine operations, we can outsource significantly, to data-driven insights. But the riskier, the more impactful the situation, if it impacts, safety of people and environment or processes, or has serious legal or, ethical implications, we should always bring in experience. But if, it's relatively safe, relatively routine, we can, outsource that more. That's kind of how I would approach it.
It's always said about disruptive technology these days. As a matter of fact, if it's not disruptive, it's not considered consequential. The more disruptive it is, the more high profile it is, so to speak. So how do we then deploy this disruptive technology without necessarily also disrupting cooperations?
Yeah. No, thanks. I think it takes back to the response I just gave. I think we have to layer our operations, both in terms of businesses, but also individuals. So there will be a core, safe zone. So if I think about operations, for example, I think about our production operations, our drilling operations, our project execution operations. So in production, you have, fluids under high pressure, high temperature. In drilling, you have heavy duty equipment. Project execution as well, you have lots of moving parts. So in this kind of areas, you want to protect that. You want to make sure that only what you've tested and truly tested, you deploy there, because anything that goes wrong here has significant implications for life, and for asset of the environment. So for me, that's one layer. Then, of course, like I said, you have the outer layers, the more support functions, process administration, type of processes where you can then, be a bit more disruptive. So that's how I would layer it from a business perspective. For individuals, I think it's around the mindset and embedding that innovation mindset. Because if you're right, if you introduce solutions or ideas that are too disruptive, people don't uptake them. People reject them, and if people don't uptake them, then you don't get the benefit, and then you've invested money. So you have to find the right balance between how do you make sure that you are working on the mindsets of people, creating the environment where people feel actually empowered to innovate, to improve the work they do. That way, hopefully, they're a lot more receptive to ideas, and those ideas are less disruptive than they would otherwise be.
Is there a scenario in which we can balance all the various aspects, the various things we want to accomplish in our operations? We want to ensure safety of the high standards. We want to ensure an environmental responsibility as well. We also want to increase profitability. So all of these technologies, is it possible for us to harness this and ensure that we're able to balance things out and one area doesn't suffer compared to another?
It's a good question. I mean, it's actually that question is at the heart of leadership, because ultimately, as a leader, part of what you do every day is make decisions that have consequences, for safety, or for operations, or for finance, as the case may be. I think it's possible to achieve that balance to a large extent. I mean, there will always be situations where you can't control, but to a large extent, I think so. And one of the key levers to do that is planning. It's front-end loading, as we call it. Front-end loading means doing a lot of pre-work and really thinking through all of the possibilities and trying to find mitigations. So with proper planning, I think you can achieve that. Of course, there will always be things that come up, emergencies, unforeseen circumstances. But the more disciplined you are at planning, the fewer emergencies you tend to have, the fewer unforeseen circumstances you have. So I think planning is probably the planning and discipline. So you plan, you spend time planning, but then you also, employ the right discipline to execute your plan.
And maybe finally, what mindset should the industry, the oil and gas industry in Nigeria, have as regards to deploying technology, deploying innovation? What should be the mindset?
I think it should be a progressive one. We should see technology as a key enabler, as a key partner. Because if you think about it, where would humanity be without technology? If you think about the wheel, for example, simple wheel. If we didn't have a wheel, how would we get around? So I think technology, whereas of course in the wrong hands or under the wrong circumstances can have very negative consequences. To a large extent, I think humanity has shown an ability to use technology positively. So I would encourage all of us to see technology as a partner, as a critical lever, to something to embrace, of course, cautiously, well educated, something to embrace, to make life better for us. For the industry, specifically in Nigeria, the local industry, especially onshore industry, I think we can do a lot more partnering, idea sharing, leveraging each other's lessons. So we should create more platforms to share what we've learned, so that as a whole, we can support the national vision to continue to grow production, safely, sustainably, to benefit our people.
I think finally now, with Renaissance's recent Innovation Week, which we talked about earlier on, what is the direction in which the company is going as far as technology and innovation is concerned?
I think we have three rules, three simple rules or three simple checkpoints. Is it safe? Is it ethical? Does it add value? If you answer those three questions, feel empowered to go ahead. I think that's our mantra. So, always ask, what can I do better? How can I improve this process? And when you have an idea, just check it. Is it safe? Doesn't do any harm? Is it ethical? Doesn't break any compliance laws? And does it add value? And if all those three are checked, please go ahead.
And that's a wrap on this episode of Canvas, the Niger-Delta Roundtable, brought to you by Renaissance. We've discussed how technology and innovation is improving energy at Renaissance, and who best to have this conversation with than Abdulrahman Mijinyawa, Vice President at Renaissance Africa Energy Company. AR, it's been a pleasure having this conversation with you.
Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure.
Is it safe? Is it ethical? Does it
add value?
Answer those three questions, and you're good to go. And that's where we are at Renaissance Africa Energy Company. Thanks for being a part of this. I'm Daya Lushakin. Bye for now.